Good morning, YouTube. It's Thorn. I have a cat mug with coffee, and I'm baking pie, because that is what I do on weekends. But I wanted to poke in and say hi and say words. My last several videos have been update videos. It's been a while since I've really talked about anything, and I thought I would share some thoughts about broadly about like the dissolution of community. Partially this is inspired by something that's happened in the YouTube tarot community really recently. A YouTuber who honestly I didn't watch, but a lot of the folks who I do subscribe to are currently posting reaction videos. Basically a prominent YouTuber posted a testimonial converting to Christianity, and this has caused a disruption. A lot of people like feel betrayed. Something very similar happened with Doreen Virtue a while ago, obviously on a different scale. When Doreen Virtue does something like that, I mean, we're talking about somebody who's kind of historically been on a pedestal versus somebody who feels like your friend. Like, those are two very different kinds of conversions. So it's partially inspired by that. Like, what happens when somebody leaves, and somebody leaves in such a way that it kind of questions or maybe like breaks the community in painful ways, partially because you feel like you're losing a friend, but also they're saying something derogatory about the community that they're leaving behind. So partially that, and then also there's been a lot of drama in my meat space community here in Charlotte, just because like every few years our Pagan Pride Day kind of blows up, and it's for one reason or another. But anyway, it's blown up again. And again, like for various reasons, and I'm not directly involved, okay, but I am close to people who are feeling that fallout and sort of watching people process the discovery first of like kind of the realization that people aren't necessarily who you thought you were, who they thought they were, and then watching the repercussions, both on like an event, right, that people look forward to, but then also just like those personal relationships with people who you've trusted for years. So there's a lot of dissolution happening around me. Foxfire was dealing with something a couple of years ago, just kind of collectively, because there are several of us, and at the same time, many of us kind of found ourselves in positions where we were moving into other phases of our lives, I think, whether that meant like in our relationships, like our personal lives with spouses or kids or whatever, or jobs. I know for me that involved taking up a teaching career, which meant that my whole schedule shifted really dramatically. And we found ourselves in a position where we weren't circling as frequently and with the same kind of foci that we'd had in the past. And that led to this feeling of like, oh my God, is the coven gonna blow up? So those are kind of the things that have inspired my talking here. So like, what do you do when your community breaks a little bit or feels like it's breaking? I don't know that my attitude is particularly widespread. So background, I'm an Army brat, and one of the things, for those of you who grew up as brats or who are involved in military families now, one of the experiences that we all kind of share in some capacity is moving. I was lucky in the sense that I only moved I guess technically twice, once I really remember. They were significant moves, but also just being surrounded by military families. So even though my parents were pretty stable, my friends often moved away. And one of the things you learn growing up in an environment like that is that, like, it's kind of sad, but it's true, like, you really don't get super attached to people. Not because you don't love them, and it's not that people don't keep in touch or whatever, but like, if you know you're going to be moving in 2 years and going to a different school, or like, you know that your best friend is going to end up somewhere else in a year anyway, like, it's not that you don't get attached. It's just that there's always some part of you that's kind of preparing for monumental change at all times. And I think that attitude carries into adulthood. So I know I had to do a lot of personal work as an adult to kind of change some of my attitudes about relationships. And one of the things that I've said pretty frequently in my life is that I think relationships a lot of the times have expiration dates, like whether or not you get to know what they are, whether because somebody moves or somebody dies, or like people just change. I think that's kind of the biggest thing is we all say that, you know, people change and people can change and we should change and grow, but it's really challenging, like when you're actually confronted by that change, to let somebody go, or to let yourself move on from other people. And my attitudes about these things have become a lot more nuanced, but I think in cases like this, that lesson is actually really valuable. Those kind of attitudes develop as coping mechanisms. And so what happens is, like, when in Pagan Spaces, for example, when there's this instance of, you know, somebody leaving or somebody changing dramatically, whether it's because they're converting or there's some kind of social blow up and I'm leaving this coven and I'm doing something else and I'm joining this tradition or whatever. Like, I guess I've just seen so much of that in different parts of my life that I'm less fazed by it. I don't know, like, it's kind of comforting knowing that people change and you will have different people around you over the course of your life. Like, you will find other people to befriend and inspire, and community leaders change, and it's traumatic in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, like, it kind of just is what it is. I tend to be kind of stoic about stuff like this. I think the other mistake that people make, and this is kind of happening in my immediate meat space right now, people forget when they're wrapped up in a particular group, whether it's one coven or a planning committee for an event, or you know, a meetup group or a tarot study group or whatever. Like when it's your immediate group, it's really easy to forget that is not the whole of your religious community. You know, Foxfire is not the whole of Gardnerian Wicca, right? The Pagan Pride Day planning committee is not right, the Charlotte pagan community. It's not, right, like the YouTube tarot community is not the tarot community, right? Like, there are lots of smaller communities within the space. I don't know, like, and I don't say that to disparage anybody who's hurting, but just kind of as a way of, like, comforting, and, like, I find this sort of thing comforting, like the reminder that there are a lot of other people out there. And when you feel like your own world is crashing down for whatever reason, it's really helpful to go and explore another community. When Foxfire was struggling a couple of years ago, I took a lot of comfort in hanging out in places going and hanging out at Pantheacon, right, for example, and meeting with other guards and some of my Patheos friends, and just realizing that, you know, people change and, like, groups evolve, and it's actually healthy most of the time, and, like, there's a bigger world out there. It's one of the reasons why we love going to Free Spirit gatherings so much. Like, when we think about the wider pagan community, like, that's a big part of our wider pagan community, and it's great to get out of our bubble in North Carolina and go see what's going on in Maryland. That's really healthy. I watch, like, here on YouTube, I have a smattering of very different people I follow. I don't feel like I'm necessarily part of a singular community anymore, just because so many of the YouTubers who I was interacting with when I first started have moved on to do other things. And so my involvement looks really different. So, like, for example, the woman who posted the testimonial video and left, like, I'd never watched her videos. Like, I didn't know who she was, because the tarot people who I follow aren't her, right? So I don't feel that kind of impact, obviously. You know, there are a ton of Wiccan YouTubers. If I were to defect and take down all my comments and all of my videos, like, you know, there are lots of people who would never notice because it's a great big world out there. And that's true in meat space too. And I don't say that to like devalue any one person. I'm not going anywhere, okay? And I hope that people who I follow aren't going anywhere. But sometimes people do, and we have to be okay with that. You know, like there's a lot of talk right now that I'm hearing in my local community about like, you know, the community being on hold and like needing to heal and whatever, and like that's fine, but the reality is we're only talking about a handful of people, like in the grand scheme of things. I mean, I'd venture to say that most of the pagans in this area aren't involved in that event, and aren't involved in that drama. And I'm not saying that it's not important and that, right, that it doesn't warrant attention. Of course it does. But I say it because maybe it's comforting to think that there's a great big world out there, and there's a lot of other things going on. You know, like, it's not the end of the world, basically. It's not the end of the world when one person leaves. It's not the end of the world when one group dissolves. You know, like, that's maybe the army brat in me talking, but that's kind of where I stand with stuff like that. So I think it's useful to kind of, you know, be angry and grieve and like get that out there. That's fine. But spending too much time in that space and allowing it to fester in unhelpful ways, like, you end up just using it to isolate yourself, and you end up being the one to break down your own community because you stop participating in it because you think that one piece of drama is all there is. So anyway, those are my morning coffee thoughts. Not to diminish anybody's struggle, but you know, it's a great big world out there and people are going to do what they're going to do. And honestly, like, we don't have a whole lot of power over what other people are going to do. So I think it's better to just not put all your eggs in one basket. And I'm literally turning into my parents while I sit here talking to you. So I'm going to stop. But I hope you guys are having a good morning, and I'll talk to you later. My pie's almost done.